Good morning. This is 1 in 36, a presentation from Anderson Center for Autism, celebrating their centennial in 2024. 1 in 36 is a weekly show devoted to autism spectrum disorder.
Good morning and welcome to 1 in 36, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, Chief Development Officer at Anderson Center for Autism, and I am having the great pleasure this morning of talking to one of my colleagues from Anderson, Elaine Kayhan. Did I say that correctly? Okay.
That is.
Excellent. Elaine, good morning. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show.
Yeah, of course. My pleasure.
So, Elaine, I know, at least my understanding, we have not formally met in person. However, you are, among other things, you were an occupational therapist, and you work at Anderson. And how long have you been with Anderson?
Almost a year now. Yeah,
okay.
It flew by. Yeah, I'm loving it. And it's a great OT team. And, all the staff are amazing, and as well as the kids. So, yeah.
I am a fan of the OT team for two reasons, mainly. One, because I am somewhat aware of all the work you do, and I think it's obviously very important. It helps our students and adults so much. OT to me is one of those things that you think about, sort of fine motor types of things, but there's a lot more to OT and a lot of ways to utilize your skill and background. So hopefully you'll share with us a little bit of some of maybe the lesser known things about OT. But the other reason why I love your team so much is because you do things like OT week and you really celebrate. And it's like, it's just so you always seem like such a fun, positive group that you send us pictures to post. And, and so we appreciate your high morale and your high enthusiasm for what you do.
Thank you.
So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to ask you let's learn a little bit about you, Elaine, as a person and kind of your background and leading up to who you are today.
Sure. Well, I am a pediatric occupational therapist, and it is definitely my passion working with children. There is a lot to OT. There's, like you said, it's more than just fine motor. You look at the whole person when you try to approach, how to help them achieve whatever they want and need to do in their life, whatever situation they're in. Let's say they're in school, it's to help them with actually achieving their curriculum, right? Their education. And I've worked in the hospital setting all the way to, a clinical setting, as well as, of course, the schools, which I'm in now. And there's been so many wonderful people I've met over the years, and so many amazing challenges. There's so much to problem solve, which I absolutely love, and just thinking outside the box. And for sure, the portion of OT that really, I would say, calls to me the most is sensory processing, because it's really an underrated or kind of an underestimated area, because it really just helps us to feel, calm for getting the right amount of input, the right type of input, the right intensity. Everybody can actually benefit from knowing themselves a little bit more and how they take in information, in their environment. Because it really is, it kind of all goes back to this, it all goes back to that foundation of just, do we feel calm? Do we feel regulated, enough to learn what we need to? And, just to get through the day in an efficient and, peaceful way. Right.
Yeah.
So there's so much to it.
And I love what you're saying is reminding me that sensory processing, but I'm not the professional. So if I'm wrong, please tell me. But it really seems like the sensory processing piece is it's so individualized to every person. Which is a really functional, great, sort of perfect balance for you might be way too much overload for me, or totally not enough, and I need a lot more in order to feel the same way at the end of the day.
Yes.
I find that aspect of it really fascinating, that it's so individualized, even families and siblings and people of the same age.
Yes.
That doesn't exactly factor in. So can you give a couple of somebody, without using names, but a time when you worked with somebody where you got to watch that person hit the sweet spot when it came to sensory processing, and what that looks like, or what it felt like to see it? Yes,
absolutely. I mean, of course, even my day-to-day life, I have a husband who is absolutely the opposite of me in terms of what his threshold is for sensory information, especially auditory information. He's really sensitive to noise, and I kind of am a seeker. So I really enjoy background noise. I kind of want to work at a coffee shop or just be around people, kind of seeing different things as well. So we have exactly the opposite profiles. And even when I was working with children, it was really neat to see, because it's like, all right, let's just try to figure out how you tick. That's where we have to start,
Yeah.
Because if the goal is something like, all right, we have to get this, this assignment done, or we need to write X amount of sentences. How are we going to do this in a way that, honors how you're wired? And like, let's say you really need to move in your chair, like that's fine. Let's get into seeing if we can experiment with those, movement cushions, if they have the correct tools before, let's say, sitting down for an extended period of time, if they are able to kind of, use a little back and forth swinging movements and in an outpatient setting. And actually at Anderson too, we do have a swing that goes back and forth called a platform swing. It's very calming for a lot of our kids. So if they're feeling hyperactive, that might be a good place to start. But even, you can use a movement cushion, like I mentioned, or there's also heavy pressure activities are really calming. So that's something I used a lot with, especially the kids who were hyperactive or maybe had a difficulty, staying still for a few minutes at a time. So meditation was actually one of the tools I used for quite a few of my kids in an outpatient setting they were a little bit older, they were in their teens and maybe, older than that too. So they actually were more receptive to it than I could have imagined that they would be. Here I am, like, I'm really passionate about meditation because, my mom got me into it because she had this like health crisis and she really benefited from it. But when I started looking into the research, I was really blown away by the evidence, just really stating that there's just so many, not only physiological benefits, like, in terms of like lowering your heart rate and blood pressure and just literally like the pathway to being calm, right? But there was just a bunch of research saying that it actually helped with ADHD-like symptoms. So with inattention and especially with hyperactivity. So it's kind of, the irony is not lost on me at all. Like it's very, it was a challenge for me to kind of like, how do we get somebody, that is having a very hard time focusing, right? To actually, quiet their mind enough to just kind of go inward and just, allow themselves to enter into this more relaxed, calm state. And really it's just about, finding the right strategies, like I was mentioning. So, for one of our kids, bouncing on an exercise ball really seemed to help them during the meditation itself. So it's kind of allowing for that movement, but for another kid, it wasn't enough. They needed a lot more, like crashing into, let's say, those crash pads that we have even at Anderson, kind of like jumping and crashing into it repeatedly, like kind of wakes up the body, wakes up the nervous system. So that would be enough to, you're getting a lot of that heavy pressure input as well, or even, yoga poses, something where you're weight bearing with like, your hands and your feet. We did a lot of that in our therapy sessions. So I really tried to incorporate sensory strategies, within their meditative practices, and I saw some results. Like you start really small and you work your way up gradually. Even like 1 minute, that's where we were at with some of the kids. And just to see that, that they could do it, I think that sense of like success really was just so encouraging, not only for them, but for me. Cause it was just, this was kind of an, maybe not so traditional area.
Well, I was going to say you're, cause we have to go into a break in a minute, but all the things you're talking about are reminding me of actually one of the main reasons why Anderson Center, formerly Anderson School, was founded 100 years ago. Yeah. The founder wanted a place for students to come. Back then, they usually came for a year or two, but these were students who were just struggling. They needed a different approach to their education and their learning that was more individualized, whatever that might be. Now, back in the 20s, bouncing on a ball, some of the things that we can do now or that you might recommend in a classroom setting were not going to be accepted practices.
Right.
But on a different level, the idea of something different, maybe a smaller class size, maybe a different array of academic coursework that was a little more engaging, and anything out of sort of the expectation that I think thankfully we've really moved away from, which is the idea that every student learns the same way, and so the input can be the same for everybody. So everything you're describing is just making me think, gosh, how far we've come with being able to say that, a little bit of movement, even for me, when you just said, well, so-and-so, a student needed to bounce on a ball while meditating. I don't have experience with meditation, but I certainly have probably ridiculous preconceived notions about what it looks like.
Yes.
And I'm like listening, going, you're not allowed to bounce while you meditate. Like I thought you had to be completely still and in this completely sort of bare environment. And so you're kind of opening my eyes up to maybe I don't really fully understand what meditation is. And that is where we're going to stop, take a quick break, and then come back and ask you to define that for us and tell us about your book, which is such an exciting milestone for you.
Thank you.
All right. This is 1 in 36, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, and we'll be right back.
Sometimes I just cannot believe all the storms we've gone through here.
I can only hope that we'll be able to leave this house to you one day, baby. You're our legacy.
Planning for these disasters will make sure we're safe, and is the best way to protect that legacy. You know what? We should make an emergency communication plan. That way we're ready this year. At my dorm, we have emergency kits for earthquakes and wildfires, but I'm sure there's something more local I can send you with a link.
Okay.
Smart.
Protect your legacy. Visit ready.gov/plan for the tools and tips you need to start your emergency preparedness plan today. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Somewhere there's a river rushing through the woods while someone rushes through their day. There's a mountain looking up at the sky while someone looks down at their phone. A trail waiting to be walked while someone waits for a latte. This world is full of somewheres waiting for someone just like you. So go see yours at 154 national forests and 20 grasslands. And to learn more, visit nationalforest.org. The National Forest Foundation. See your somewhere.
Wouldn't it be great if life came with a remote control? You could hit pause when you needed to, or hit rewind. Like that time you knocked down that wasp's nest. Uh-oh. Or that time you forgot to roll up your windows in the car wash.
Fantastic.
Yeah, a remote control would have come in handy then. Well, life doesn't always give you time to change the outcome, but prediabetes does. With early diagnosis and a few healthy changes like managing your weight, getting active, stopping smoking, and eating healthier, you can stop prediabetes before it leads to type 2 diabetes. It's easy to learn your risk. Take the 1-minute test today at doihaveprediabetes.org. Life doesn't come with a remote control. Yikes! So you're on your own with the wasps. You have the power to take control of prediabetes. Visit doihaveprediabetes.org today. That's doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its pre-diabetes awareness partners.
And now, 1 in 36 continues on 100.7 WHUD. This is a weekly community affairs program presented by the Anderson Center for Autism.
Welcome back to 1 in 36, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky from Anderson Center for Autism, and I'm speaking with my colleague, Elaine Kayhan, who is an occupational therapist working at Anderson, but also an author of a book called Sensory Meditation for the Overactive Brain. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. So congratulations, first and foremost, on writing a book and having it published. I'm going to let you at some point, as you describe it, get into the subheading, which to me, I really want to learn a little bit more about that sort of 1 week thing you put in there in the title. But just where we ended the first half of the show, can you help me and our listeners understand how you define or understand what meditation is, because it's clearly not the one thing that I think about when I think about probably what I've seen on TV for years.
I know. And I definitely came across that as well. Like, when I first was getting into meditation, I just thought, okay, I'm going to have to sit really still, like we're all told to do, and just focus on my breath, and, while that can work for some people, it might not work for everyone. Right. And it's just, I honestly, so I got into meditation because of my mom. She had a really, difficult cancer journey. I think we all know someone who is ill, or had some kind of a health condition, right? Especially cancer being so prevalent. She, I think, was introduced to meditation through actually one of her nurses, which I thought was really, really interesting as well. It was a healing touch practitioner, and kind of got into reading more about it because she was so inspired by it, and just she seemed a lot more calm and accepting of her diagnosis and just her healing journey. So when I came to approach it myself, I started out just like lying down, and sort of didn't really think, okay, this doesn't really feel like meditation, but it really feels great and really relaxing. And I come to find out I sort of crave something called proprioception. So that's where you feel like where your muscles and joints are in space a little bit more. So I need that more on average, I think. Because once again, we all fall on a continuum, like we were mentioning. So you could be sort of on the opposite end of the spectrum, which is under responsive, where you're going to need way more input or, sensory information to feel regulated and, relaxed, right? And perform at your best. But then the opposite end is really just this oversensitivity, and you would have overreactions to whatever stimuli is in your environment. So for me, that was super simple to start there. I was like, okay, I don't know, this doesn't look like meditation, but I wanted to get through my OT boards, actually. I was preparing for that. And I had a focus. I was like, I'm going to do this, but not only pass, I want to be calm. Like, I don't want to have my nerves frayed. I don't want to feel like, entering a situation where I won't be tested well just because I'm anxious, right?
Okay.
So I really made it a point to meditate, daily at that point. It's been off and on over the years. But at that point in my life, I was like very focused to pass this test. And I actually did kind of a hypnosis, which is similar. You enter into this sort of deeper, meditative state, right? It's kind of your brainwaves actually slow down, and it's called the alpha state. And that is really, really just kind of that point where you feel like it's relaxing, obviously, but it's activating that parasympathetic nervous system, which is like the rest and relax. So that's when you've entered like a meditative state. And I couldn't believe it. After a week, I was like, I can picture myself being more calm entering the test, right? And I actually was like the most calm I've ever been. And it was a really surprising, like it was a really pleasant surprise, because it was like the icing on the cake. I passed, of course. I'm an OT, but
that's a really intriguing goal. I think that's a great goal, and not one that too many people think about. But I think that bears repeating, that you can use tools to not only reach your goal, but to reach your goal and feel the way you would like to feel while reaching that goal. I think most people entering tests are really focused on just, I'm either going to pass or I'm going to fail,
right?
As opposed to, I want to feel good while I'm taking it. So I'm going to take that away from this conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Good.
All right. And so then I just don't want to lose it. I want to take a few minutes to make sure we touch on the book itself and why you wrote it, and what is, who should buy it? Is it for everyone? Is it for parents and caregivers or people with special needs? Like, who's it, what's your target audience?
So really it is for anyone that's struggling with meditation. Maybe you're new to it. Maybe you just, are looking for an easy entry point into it. You're just not sure where to start. But it gives you kind of just a reference point for how you tick. So there's a questionnaire that shows you, okay, these are the areas where you might need to focus your energy on a little bit more. There's actually 8 sensory systems, which is surprising to some people. Most of us know like the five, right? Taste, touch, smell, auditory, and visual, right? But we also have proprioception, which I mentioned, which is kind of, it gives you that body awareness. So whatever, kind of like high energy activities that kind of activate those muscles and joints are going to be really beneficial for calming purposes. You really can't overdo that one, right? And there's vestibular. The vestibular system is really just giving you your sense of postural balance. And if you're thrown off or sensitive, then you get really dizzy sometimes. But we all need a variety of this kind of input in our lives to feel, at our best. And we're definitely not getting enough of it in our modern age with our sedentary work lifestyles. We're probably not getting outside enough to get that natural sunlight and to just be exposed to just, nature, right? There's so much to it that actually we're just not getting enough of. And so I think if you're looking to find out how you tick, and if you're looking to get deeper into your meditation and not waste a lot of time like I did, like I would just sit there for literally like 15 minutes with my eyes closed and just like hoping, right, that I would slip into this like beautiful state with total bliss and nothing would happen. It just made me kind of discouraged, I think, at the beginning. I just didn't really have a goal. I feel like that first experience I had, I was really like goal oriented, right? But after that, I kind of fell off and on. And so the book, I wish I had a book like this. So that's why I wrote it, because I really wished someone could have given me just a quick little handbook, like of a roadmap, of, okay, these are my top 3 areas where I'm maybe struggling a little bit more in. It's definitely harder, I think, if you are an under responder, because you might not realize that you have some of these things going on. It's not as obvious as, let's say, someone that's distracted by noise, or someone that has aversions to, different textures or clothing, or things like that. So for me, it took a while, even as an OT, to kind of like put the pieces together. And so after working with those children, and after kind of experimenting with myself, because I knew that I was starting to come to realize that I had these preferences as well, pretty strong, tendencies to want more input, right? So I just tried them out for myself, and I thought, okay, this is really making me enter the meditative state much more quickly and much more deeply. And it was amazing to me. Instead of wasting it felt like I was wasting 15 minutes. I'm sure there was some benefit to it, but
there's also, I think for some people, trying it might at first feel awkward. And so if you don't get a pretty fast return on the time you're spending trying to get right, it's going to be easy to say, well, that's just another thing that didn't really make me feel any different. And I'm thinking about even people in their teen years, young 20s, people who are sort of busy all the time and have a lot going on, but are, also lived through COVID at a pretty tough time in their lives, right. Maybe didn't get, some social input, at a time that many of us did when we were, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. There's so many different things that are coming to mind as you're speaking that I think you're right. Having something that helps you just feel like you are making progress and getting there. Even if it doesn't, you don't feel it immediately. It might hook somebody a little bit for a little bit longer. So I love that. Tell us where you can find your book.
Yeah, definitely. You can find it on Amazon, actually, as a physical copy or an ebook. Okay. So you can do that. You can go to I have a website, so it's just simple enough, ElaineKayhan.com. And there should be a link to it with that. Okay. So you can do that as well.
We'll put all that information in when we post this podcast so that people can go check it out and buy it or, use it as an ebook. It sounds great. It's great that you did it in 2 different ways. Always an OT, right? Once an OT, thinking about how people want to take in information.
Right.
So I think that's really great. And, Elaine, it's just wonderful to have you as a member of the Anderson team. I can see not everybody will be able to see this, but I can see just looking at your face today, how much much you enjoy what you do and how much joy it brings you just talking about both meditation, but also the students you work with and seeing them reach their goals. So it's really been a pleasure getting to know you. And once again, go visit Elaine's website, Elaine Kayhan, which is spelled KAYHAN.com for more information about her and her book, Sensory Meditation for the Overactive Brain. And I guess reading it or listening to it, you will understand how to get to that meditative state. I think you say pretty deeply within a week.
Yes, so, there's a protocol. Exactly.
There's a protocol. Not everybody has to do it that fast, but it's really been interesting, and you've opened my eyes to a lot of new things, Elaine. So thank you so much for being on 1 in 36 today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
This is 1 in 36, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, and remember, Anderson cares.
You've been listening to 1 in 36, a weekly presentation from Anderson Center for Autism, celebrating their centennial in 2024. Join them for another edition of the show next weekend.